Okay, so MRP. What I want to do is take a bit of this time to talk about the process that happens for MRP. This will take, the total of what we're going to do should take about 2 hours, I guess is what we've got here. Whatever. I'm not really hung up on whether we're going to end MRP at 11 or what, because both of those topics to me kind of go together. So the MRP engine. So currently we run MRP as a process that happens at a certain time of day. Traditionally, historically, people have run it overnight. And that is certainly the case back when processors and the best software was slower than it is today. So we were talking typically 4 or 5 hours to run MRP regeneration. The largest database I've seen so far has been taking about an hour. If you guys are more, let me know, but that should be the maximum upward limit. Although at the same time, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's an on-demand, like run it 5 times a day. That's not its intent. Its intent is to run it at a certain time of the day each day, then analyze the results and run the day, and move on. That's its design. There are certainly some thoughts, and there are certainly designs out there for various people call it various things, but be able to run an MRP on demand for just a term normally uses net change MRP, where it only looks at the things that changed since the last MRP. That's something we're looking at. We're not doing that at this point. So we are a full MRP. You run, and you get the entire cycle through that MRP generation. And what this first part of the session is talking about what's happening behind the scenes in MRP. Big flow chart here. Be happy to send you this. We're going to pull this apart such that it's actually a lot easier to understand once you look at it in small bite-sized pieces. But this is basically what's happening. At the end of the day, what MRP is doing is it's finding out where you don't have enough inventory and making a suggestion to take care of it. That's really all it's doing. Okay? And it's kind of netting more than kind of, it's netting supply and demand. Demand being a sales order, supply being a purchase order, a batch ticket, etc. So let's kind of walk through this process a little bit. And I'll start with kind of clearing it out, and then if my screen will cooperate. There we go. So we'll clear that out, and we'll just start kind of one piece at a time. And we'll talk a little bit about the demand of an item. So right now I'm talking about calculating a sales demand requirement of a finished good. And that can actually come in form of 2 sources. You could either have a forecast for a period of time, whether that be a day, a week, a month, whatever period of time you're interested in forecasting, and then sales orders that fall within that same time period. Now know that MRP is all about, it's really after every transaction. So it's analyzing for an item, by date, it's analyzing every single transaction that's happening. Okay? So if a forecast record hits on the first day of the month, it's assuming that forecast record for that day of the month. And then a sales order comes later, it's looking at those individual dates and determining when those transactions are happening. So it's very date sensitive in what I'm talking about. So we're kind of using somewhat of a nebulous term here called forecast, which might represent multiple days, weeks, or months, but in reality there's a date associated with that forecast, and that becomes pretty important to MRP. Same thing with the sales order. So it's looking at the sales order line items, specifically the expected ship date is really what we're looking at. On the line item, by the way, not on the header. So an important distinction to make. I'll speak for all of them, really. You can have a header date. The order was taken on this date. We want it shipped by that date. But all the systems support a line item date for each individual line item. So on a sales order, you could have multiple shipments going out at different dates. We're looking at the line item date, and that's important to know. So we're netting sales orders and forecasts together to come up with the total sales demand for a day, for example. Then we have, staying on the demand side of things, we've got production demand, which is the accumulation of batch ticket as well as planned order demand. And you're going to learn about what a planned order is in a second, but think of it as a batch ticket. Think of it as a batch ticket that's on your schedule that we haven't converted to a batch ticket. So I'm thinking about making this for one reason or another, and you'll find out why you might do that in a minute. But I'm thinking about making this, and that's a planned order, or I've actually got a batch ticket out there. So this is the demand of a raw material is what I'm talking about right now. So demand, production demand comes by adding together the batch ticket as well as planned order requirements, bringing us to a total demand for an item. Now the reason I differentiate that is, or show them together, is that an inventory item could be a raw material from production perspective and a finished good from a sales perspective. So I could sell it as well as use it. And MRP doesn't care. It needs to take into consideration both scenarios. And that's why in this slide I'm showing that on one hand, under the sales demand side, you would probably think in terms of a finished good in this area. And on the production side, on the other side, you would probably be thinking about a raw material. But it could be in any inventory item. It could be doing both.
Mm-hmm. Are you taking into account, I think I know the answer, but are you taking into account now inventory or warehouse demand at all? Order points?
No. I think I'll get to it in a minute. If I don't in just a minute, let's bring the question back up. Then we net against it the supply. So this is inbound coming in. Whether it be POs or batch tickets. So for a traditional raw material, I would buy it, it would come in via PO. Or for a produced item, it would be inbound via a batch ticket. So in the end item section of a batch ticket is what I'm referring to here. So MRP is looking at POs in Dynamics as well as batch tickets, the batch end item table, which is the end item section on a batch ticket, and it's looking to find what you are expecting to produce or what you're expecting to receive. It will also look at this concept called planned orders again, of which might be nebulous to you right now, but it's basically a scheduled something to happen. In other words, I haven't created a PO, but the system sees I've got one that I'm going to create a PO. Or the system sees that I'm going to make this product, but I haven't turned that into a batch ticket. So a planned order is a schedule record. It's not a traditional batch ticket or a traditional PO. It's the stage before becoming a batch ticket or the stage before a PO. You can create a planned order manually. In other words, I say I'm going to make this, but I'm not ready to cut a batch ticket. You can create it manually. But you're going to find out in a minute that when you find a shortage, MRP is going to create it for you on your behalf.
Are you able to set up alerts? Like say that you've had the system telling you to create, it creates these planned orders, but on the item setup, you've set a lead time, and say you haven't converted or created the PO and it starts to fall within that lead time, will you get an expedite report or alert?
You can, yeah.
You can do that.
So in a minute, when we talk about the creation of a planned order, it will tell you what the start and end date of that planned order is. So we take a PO for a second. The start date of a PO or a start date for a planned order that's going to generate a PO is the date in which you need to talk to the vendor. The end date is the date in which you need to receive it. The difference is the lead time. So on the planned order, you've got two dates. You've got a start date and an end date. And you'll see that in a few minutes. So what we've done here is just calculated the total supply. So I've got stuff coming in, either on POs or batch tickets, which is pretty firm in nature, versus scheduled, which is planned orders. In other words, I haven't really told anybody about it necessarily. I haven't created a batch ticket and I haven't created a PO yet. So both of those is supply. If we didn't take that into consideration, you'll find in a little bit that we would in effect over commit or over request inventory if we didn't take consideration planned orders. Now we pick up quantity on hand and safety stock. I think this might get to where Steve was coming from. If not, we'll find out in a second. So we're looking at quantity on hand for this item in Dynamics. That can be adjusted slightly, but it's quantity on hand, and then safety stock. And so when we talk about available, you've got a couple of options when MRP runs. There are a couple of check boxes there. One of those check boxes is say, remove safety stock from on hand and start with me my available balance is net the quantity above my safety stock. That's what I've got available to work with. That's one checkbox. Another checkbox is, in this quantity on hand that I've got, I want to exclude lots that are going to expire soon. And you can define what soon means, X number of days. So if I've got lots that are expiring in the next 10 days, I don't want to take them into consideration for MRP. So quantity on hand can be adjusted. Quantity on hand can be adjusted by expiring lots, and safety stock can be considered or not, and that's up to you. Okay. That gives us an available. So what I've got in effect is a net available, kind of like quantity on hand. I've got a total demand for a time period, let's say a day, and I've got total supply. The rest of it is fairly simple math of saying, do I have enough to fulfill, do I have enough quantity on hand plus total supply that is in excess of my total demand? Do I have enough to fill the orders? And put it in plain English. If I don't have enough, then we kick out a planned order. A planned order is our way, is Vicinity's way to communicate to you that you're going to be short. Whether that's a purchased item or whether that's a manufactured item. We'll talk about the difference of those in a minute. But a planned order is nothing more than a record in the system saying, hey, you need to take action. If you want to accomplish what the system says you're trying to accomplish, you're going to need a planned order to do that. And I'm intentionally being vague in the respect of we're not really talking about either a raw material or a finished good. We're just talking about an inventory item. And so it goes through this process for every single inventory item. And every transaction, actually. A planned order can be turned into a batch ticket then. So you can have a planned order sitting out there in queue for a long period of time, and then maybe a day or two before you go into production, you can convert that planned order into a batch ticket. Now, as I told you, the scenario we just came through is where MRP is creating the planned order. You can create a planned order yourself. So you don't have to wait for MRP to kind of come up with that exception. If you know something and you want to go ahead and put it in, you can do that. And that's why the system is looking at existing planned orders on demand and existing planned orders on supply. You might have created planned orders as well.
When it's looking at it, if you created your own planned orders,
yep,
and the system in a previous run has created the planned order,
that's
you
right.
haven't, is it still, it's factoring both of those in?
It is. It's a great question, and the observation might be that you're getting to is you could have a duplicate. Is maybe the concern? Okay. So the way we handle this, so the scenario that we've got is that I'm cruising along and I'm manually creating planned orders, and the system is creating planned orders also. That's the scenario that should concern you. What's really happening as soon as MRP starts, first thing it does is it deletes every planned order that it created that you haven't done anything with. So that theoretically, yesterday when it ran, it created these planned orders. Let's say hypothetically I didn't look at it, and I went and created planned orders myself. And I didn't look at theirs, and I'll talk about how you can interact with a planned order in a little bit. But I didn't tell it that I was going to do anything with that planned order. When MRP regens the next time, it gets rid of all those planned orders it did yesterday, whatever date I said. And then it sees your planned orders and says, I don't need a planned order anymore. So it gets rid of that duplicate per se. Does that help? All right, so at the end of the day, what MRP is really doing is looking for opportunities to tell you to make something or buy something. That's really what it's doing at basic level. It's also finding scenarios where you don't either need to do something. In other words, if it doesn't see any demand for a product, it will notify you and say, hey, you've got a batch ticket out there and I don't see why you're making it. Just as a warning, just letting you know. Or, hey, I see you're going to make this, but I really need it at this point, but you're making it at this point. Instead of creating another planned order, why don't we move this planned order or batch ticket forward in the schedule to get it taken care of? So we're not, in this case, doubling it up to make it on this date, only to turn around and make it on another date, and I didn't really need it the second time. So it will deal with exceptions as well. So MRP is doing a great deal behind the scenes, hence why net change can get a little fun, trying to find out all the tentacles associated with the net change. So if we take actual example here, here's a finished good. If we start on the sales demand and we talk about a forecast, I've got, I don't know that I said this, but when we're working with forecasts versus sales orders, we're going to take the greater of those two numbers, right? In effect, we net sales orders against forecasts is another way of looking at it. So in this case, I've got a forecast of 150 units with a sales orders of 100 out there. We're going to be using the forecast records. Now, when sales orders start to increase, and let's say they go from 100 to 120 to 150 to 170, when they go to 170, we will be using that 170 number. Okay, so we're in effect looking at the net, we're looking at the greater of those two numbers, basically. I'm going to skip the production demand side of things, assuming it's a traditional finished good. And on the right-hand side, my supply, there are batch tickets that I've got out there. Don't worry about POs at this moment. So I've got 30 units being made on a batch ticket. I've cut a batch ticket. I'm good to go. And I've also got a planned order. So let's say that either I manually went and put in a planned order, or the system generated a planned order and I told it I'm good with it. I want you to do it. There's a way to do that, and I'll show you. It's called firming a planned order. But let's say that I did that. It's not going to delete that planned order, so I need to be looking at it. So it's respecting the fact that either you manually put in a planned order or you accepted one that the system said you should be making in a previous run. So I've got a total supply of 40 units under this time period. And then, of course, my quantity on hand. I am choosing to remove safety stock. There's a flag on the generation. And so I'm taking myself down to 90 units. So that's what I've got available to me. I never want to go below my safety stock is the point. MRP will always drive you to the safety stock in this model. So the quick math basically says I'm short of 20 units. 90 units minus 150 plus 40 gives me to the 20 if my math is right. And it will create what we refer to as a system planned or system generated planned order. It's unfirmed by nature. That's a term we use, firming versus unfirming. So it's an unfirmed planned order. It's a suggestion to go make product. If I flip over to the raw material, you just see numbers coming in a different way. I kept my quantity on hand and my safety stock consistent. I really kind of kept my total supply consistent. I just now kind of flipped to a PO, a little bit lazy, I guess. My POs are at 30, and I've got a planned order. In other words, I'm going to call the vendor, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. I haven't put in the PO, but there's a planned order already out there. That's what that's about. So I've got a total supply of 40. I've got batch tickets up for 150. Those are actually batch tickets that they're working on that they haven't posted anything against yet. So in other words, quantity remaining still has a number associated with it on the batch ticket. And then planned orders, back to the scenario that the system yesterday told me to make some product, and I said, yeah, that's a good idea. And I said, I'm going to keep that. So it's respecting the fact that there's a firmed planned order out there. So I've got a demand of 250 units of this raw material, do the math, and I end up with 120 units short. And that becomes a planned purchase order that I can then go into Dynamics manually. I make a point of this. You can go into Dynamics manually and create a PO.